Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're talking about Philadelphia Stars receiver Devin Gray signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. Devin Gray might not have been the most notable guy on that Stars team, but he's still very solid. And as for his time in the USFL, he ended up having 2 receiving touchdowns, which was, that massive tie for 4th. But the point is, he did have 2 touchdowns. He ended up having 215 receiving yards, which is just out of the top 25, though he could have gotten in the top 25 if he had ended up playing all 10 games. He did miss 1 game. As for his stats, he was on the roster for the Falcons for pretty much 3 years, in and out of the roster, but he never actually played a game. He was, a high-picked receiver in the draft. He was solid, but, he's back on a roster. That roster of the Chiefs, it has a wide receiver core that is very solid, but I don't know if it's as good as it used to be. Pretty good still. Juju, McCole Hardman, and Marquez and MVS are their starters. Then second string, you have Sky Moore, Josh Gordon, and Justin Watson. Third string, you have Darius Fountain, Cornell Powell, and Corey Coleman. Then fourth string, you have Omar Bayless himself and Gary Jennings. As to I know this is something else. Fourth string, third string, and second string. Fourth string, you have Omar Bayless. Hasn't even played a game. He's heading to his 3rd season. Shouldn't be a worry. Gary Jennings, he was a pick in 2019, 4th round, and he literally just played 1 game in his career. So, bad pick by Seattle so far. As the third stringers, you have a 5th round pick from 2021 who also hasn't played in Cornell Powell. Then Darius Fountain was a 5th round pick back in 2018. He did play all but 1 year since his career, but he hasn't really made an impact. He's only caught 2 passes in his career. And then Corey Coleman, definitely a draft bust, 15th overall pick that never had more than 500 yards in a season and hasn't played on an actual game since 2018. That's bad. But, so he could definitely be overtaken as he's, kind of there for, potential, but it's kind of too late for that, some people would say. Then their second stringers, Sky Moore, 2nd round pick this year's draft, should be able to help bolster that receiving core. Josh Gordon, former all-pro first team turned into missed 2 years due to substance abuse. Bounced around a lot of teams, but he still has shown flashes of being that great receiver people remembered. He's still a very solid type of guy to have as a depth piece, just not as a star anymore. Justin Watson was a 5th round pick by Tampa Bay. He played for Tampa his whole career until now. He hasn't really done anything at the pro level aside from 2 years where he had 159 and 94 receiving yards. Not really the biggest threat in receiving rotation. And their starters are pretty solid. McCall Hardman, he was an all-pro Pro Bowler as a returner, but as a receiver, he's still pretty solid. He's a consistent 500-yard guy, despite not being a main target. Juju, he was with Pittsburgh for 5 years. Last year, he only played in 5 games, and you got to remember, a couple of those years he was playing with, old Big Ben, which, as we know, is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league the last few years. But back in 2018, when you could argue the Big Ben was still at his peak, you could argue-ish, he ended up being a Pro Bowler. He had 1,400 total yards, but he hasn't been the same since then. And he's kind of been, running off name recognition rather than how good he is. As if he were to come back, you could have made a case that he was the 3rd best receiver on that team. And then MVS, 5th round pick by Green Bay. Great pick by Green Bay picking him that late because he's turned out to be a very solid, 2nd, 3rd option. His 2nd year, he only had 452 yards. But, aside from that, he did have 430 his, last year at Green Bay, though he only was in 11 games. But whenever he's in a full season, he's a consistent 500-yard guy. And it's also playing with Devontae Adams, so you don't know if his stats would be better or worse without him. But I guess we'll see as the Chiefs brought him in. As for Gray, honestly, Gray could be a 2nd stringer on this roster. I could definitely see him overtake, all those 4th stringers to be a 3rd stringer. I don't think any of those 3rd stringers are really scary, and I think he could overtake Justin Watson's place for a backup. So, we'll see. This has been Fox. If you enjoy this content, want to be notified as soon as I upload any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, and as always, have a great night.